but David and Keith and I were all able to attend a grant ceremony with the Lieutenant Governor today with the municipal fiber grants.
Awesome.
So $13 million was awarded to 71 communities. We were one of them. We were awarded $241,000 in grant money. So it was kind of interesting to see what some of the other communities are using them for. Some are like us, just getting started in fiber, and then some are really kind of expanding their offering. So it was very interesting. I think the other item of note is the we talked last time about the contract to help me out what it was going to do. It was going to measure the distance to the door.
Yeah, BRE.
Yeah. So the select board is going to take that one up on Monday. It's just under $5,000, but the select board has it on the agenda for Monday.
Okay, that's excellent.
That was everything I had. Keith, did you have anything before we get started? Keith, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. No, I don't have anything. I think we can just jump right in.
Okay. Right.
Okay. So let's do just a couple of things. I think David had inquired. Can you hear me okay?
No, you're way coming in and out.
Oh, I may have to grab my microphone. I think David had inquired with Devin about talking to a financial person, and I think that's organized for tomorrow. Devin or David, Devin, do you want to sort of give everybody else some context just so they know that's happening?
So it's organized for Monday.
Okay.
I believe. So yeah. David just reached out and asked if he kind of wants to get a jump start. And David, don't let me put words in your mouth, right? Or in your mind. Kind of get a jump start on really taking apart the financial models and the various options and really learning those in depth. I assume because he's kind of the economics financial guy, right? From Harvard and obviously has a lot more knowledge about that than I do and others. So I did introduce him to a specialist in that area that we work with a lot. And we really like this firm and this individual because they specifically, not only are they experts in municipal financing, but they are specifically probably the nation's leading expert in municipal fiber network financing. They've done more of that than any other, financial advisory firm that we know of. And so he'll be particularly, and he's just great about helping educate people, sharing information. Obviously, his motives are eventually that potentially his firm would be hired to represent you guys and help you guys with some of those financing, opportunities down the road. But we make no commitments and no promises. But he's super good about helping our clients and educating them on the options. He's done a lot of work in Fairhaven already. So he's becoming very familiar with Massachusetts law and some of the things that govern, Massachusetts specifically. But David, just to clarify though, he's not an expert in grants and federal grants, state grants, those kind of things. We're working with other people, and we'll introduce some of those folks to you. In fact, Julie's kind of taking on becoming a de facto standard for Entry Point in-house. And so that'll come later, but David Robertson is definitely an expert when it comes to anything to do with municipal financing and bonding and all that good stuff. So just FYI on that. Did you have any questions, David, on that? You're muted, bud. Can't hear you.
You might be able to hit your space bar, and that might do it.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the microphone more than anything. Make sure the correct microphone is selected, probably. Yeah, they just put you back on mute, David.
We can come back.
Yeah, you could also use we have a comment section, right? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Chat. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Let's circle back, David, and then you can comment on any of that. So we're excited about the grant. That's excellent news. And it really is. I mean, we know that another 50 million is going to get released in July. And it will undoubtedly be competitive, but I think there's going to be some opportunities as we go forward here. I think what we want to do next, we've got financials on there, and I've got a few financial questions, but I think I want to go through the timeline first, because it kind of lays out a roadmap for all the discovery on the financial modeling. So can you hear me okay? Is my mic coming in, or do I need to grab okay. All right, I'm going to share. All right, no, that's not it. All right, let me find Westport. There we go. All right, you see that okay? Is it blown up enough?
Oh, it's good.
Okay.
Richard, I'm gonna put you on mute. You're hearing background noise. Maybe not.
All right, so I've basically just laid out the main things we want to do week by week in terms of stuff we want to cover in our meetings. And so today I added one or two. I do this to Julie, so she's used to it. I added one or two things for today if we have time. But we're going to go through the timeline. Shauna covered BRE. We just want to make sure that's in queue and you've got what you need for the select board. We're going to talk about financial modeling. I just got an email from Brian Hopkins, and he said that there's been some Q&A for him relative to outsourcing, which is good. And just moving towards, what's involved in network operations and what does the financial picture look like for that. We asked Tyler to join from our team. Tyler works on the implementation group in our for Entry Point, but his background is that he comes from a network operations team. And so we brought him on just for a little bit of Q&A on what that looks like. And so you can ask him questions that you've got. So we'll do that next. Let me finish the timeline, and then we can talk about outsourcing in a little more detail. We've got this strategy questions handout to give you. We want to discuss that a little bit. That's not a lengthy conversation, but we want to sort of bend that towards a decision-making process. So we've got that to go through. And then I just want to clarify where you're at in terms of legal process. So that's stuff I wanted to cover today. On June 16th, Devin's going to jump into some market analysis, market assessment stuff, and risk analysis. And then we're going to have Julie talk about grant opportunities that are out there, what's going on at the federal level, and then what we know about the state of Massachusetts and where things are at there. On June 30th, we will have the high-level design by then. So we will have been able to start working on the financial model. We'll also want to talk about the report structure. So we'll give you sort of an outline, table of contents for the report, talk about the executive summary for the report. That's a key piece. And really that's a matter of, we want the report to reflect what you need and what you want. And so it's really putting it up on the wall and making sure that we're covering what you're asking us to cover in there. At that point, we're going to we want to get recommendations from you on the strategic considerations. And that really is not us telling you which questions you should answer. It's you telling us these are the things that we're ready to weigh in on, and these other things we're not ready to weigh in on. So it's really just driving towards that part of that point in the process. And legal memo may or may not, depending on where you're going. So we'll talk about that today, but depending on where you're going, if we are going to include a legal memo as an attachment to the report, then we want to be thinking about getting that pulled together. It's not a requirement, but it is not, it is nice to have had attorneys weigh in when the select board looks at it. So by July 14th, preliminary financial data and a draft report, and then we'll move towards finalizing the report once we get feedback from you on the draft. So this is the proposed timeline. Any questions on any of that from you? We'll send this to you so you can look at it, but any questions at this point?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Everybody comfortable with this structure?
Yeah, I think it looks good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now, David. It's good to hear you.
Okay, well, I think it sounds fine.
Okay, very good.
And I really appreciate your setting me up with David Richardson. I look forward to that. I'm just trying to educate myself. I'm an academic, so I like to learn before I shoot my mouth off.
You know what that means, though, Dave? That means everyone else in the committee is going to look to you as the expert. So,
Well, I want to prepare myself to provide as much useful information as I can.
That's great.
Just on that note, is someone going to be able to attend the Monday meeting? Someone who knows more about this contract we're talking about, like Keith, or can you be there, or do you want one of the entry point people to come?
I mean,
Gary proposed.
I can certainly be there and, talk to that, but it may have more weight if maybe someone from Entry Point is there.
Shauna, you're talking specifically about the BRE proposal and
Right, the Monday select board meeting to authorize the BRE proposal. Somebody who can explain what it is. I could try, but somebody else will do it better. So
I'd be happy to. Let me double check my schedule. I'd be happy to pop in, and I can actually show you examples of actual designs.
yeah, I mean, the board has material. I'll take a peek at the material the board already has. I just was hoping I don't need a whole crowd, just like one person. It's good. So
Yeah.
I'll send you guys the information. You can kind of figure out who can attend.
Okay.
So I am available. That's Monday at 7-ish your time, right?
Is virtual an option, Shauna?
It's yes. It can
Okay.
be.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. I assumed that actually. So
We haven't been having virtual meetings, but we do sometimes have guests. So.
okay. Yeah, I'm happy to come in virtually and show you some examples of. I could potentially show you Fairhaven's design. I could show
Yeah,
you.
we don't need a big thing because we already have the contract. We'll tell them that the report is coming in July and the big report is coming in July, but we already identified that we have a need to get that last mile so that we can get better the take rate information.
Yeah, I could probably show it in 2 minutes.
Okay, well, let us know, Shauna, if you
I'll
need
send
the
you the-
support.
Yeah.
We'll be there if you need us, and then
Okay.
tell us how long you want us to take, and we'll stay within that boundary.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the timeline from anybody? Does that look kosher with everybody? Okay. All right. Let's talk maintenance and operations of the network. So, our recommendation at this point, if the town goes forward, would be to start out outsourcing it, at least till you stabilize the network. That means get it built, get the take rate, de-risk it, and then you can clearly evaluate whether it makes sense to do M&O internally or whether you want to continue to support it with an outsourced model. So that'd be our recommendation, but we're really agnostic. If you chose to go forward and you chose to do it internally, that works. If you choose to outsource it, we think that works as well. So we really are agnostic on this point. Brian,
I can't see any way that we could possibly in-source it. I think it would
Yeah.
have to be outsourced.
Yeah.
Particularly to begin with.
okay.
I just add, I think outsourcing is the only way to go.
Okay.
We can't manage things internally. We just
Okay.
don't have the capacity.
All right. Very good. That's helpful. Brian Hopkins did not tell me what he sent you or told you. Just knowing Brian and having discussed this with him, their typical model is that it's really oriented towards events, which means if there's a storm and they come out and clean up after the storm, meaning they put wires back together and fix things, there's a certain fee structure for that. There is a scheduled maintenance and operation, so those are events as well. I'm talking to Brian about getting to a cost per premise model. We haven't landed anywhere yet, but subscribers and cities and towns would like to know what's the cost per customer per month. That's the preference, because then they can compare it to the way the world works today. Meaning, if I know what my bill is today, I want to be able to compare it to what's this new option for me. So we haven't finished that discussion with Comtrack, but I'm talking to him about that, and I'm trying to get to a model that I think a number of different cities and towns would warm up to.
Can I
David.
I think Keith has been talking to Brian and we traveled up to this grant meeting together and I learned a lot from Keith. I think he can add some information about his discussions that he's had with Brian and Comtrack.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah. So in talking with Brian, he said, that he broke it out into 3 separate fees. Basically, there's the restoration and maintenance service. There's the actual repair, which covers, going out, looking at the poles, seeing what potential maintenance comes around, it's going to be needed, in some amount of time. He said, then there's the actual repairs for the the fiber on the pole. So if there's a storm or someone hits a pole or whatever, and he gave like an estimated, he said, maybe it's 4 or 5 situations a year or something, as a kind of a South Coast estimate. And then he said there's the pathway to provisioning. So he broke it out, those 3 costs out, and it was, I think, total for all 3 of those was about 80,000 for all of that to be able to operate and maintain.
Is that an annual number, Keith?
That was an annual number, yeah.
Okay. That fits really well within our model, because we budget $10 a month for this. It might be cheaper to go his route, but it depends on risk tolerance. So we budget about $10 a month per subscriber. So you think about, if you had 1,000 subscribers, then you'd end up at $10,000 a month, so $120,000 a year. If you have 2,000 subscribers, you're gonna have double that. So anyway, I'll work with Brian to see if we can't. We'll look at 2 different paths: the current way they do it and a per subscriber per month model. In the report, given what you've said, we're just going to give you an outsourced proposal, meaning model, that we think is viable, since you're not really thinking about developing an internal department. So if you're comfortable with that in the report, that's the direction we're going to go. Does that work for everybody? Okay.
But
All right.
Did others speak?
Yes.
I'd like to hear what Sean has to say, and I think Keith is very much inclined that way. I don't know about Renee, but I think we need to call on somebody else to manage this and operate it and work for us, and we'll oversee it, but they need to do it.
Yeah, we don't have the capacity to do this.
And as a point of reference, we the current network that we pay to maintain right now, so the town pays a portion of it and the school pays a portion, that comes to a little bit more than that that cost that I just gave you. So what we're paying now for just a few internet connections between the town buildings would essentially cover in this scenario all of the fiber to the home. So to my way of looking at it, I mean, we're kind of supplementing all the operations and maintenance of the existing provider right now. Given that cost, given those costs that I just described.
Renee, any thoughts from you on this?
No, I agree. I mean, outsourcing this is, I think, the way to go. I can't imagine the town wants to take on that burden. So that sounds good.
Okay. All right. Tyler, do you just want to give them a brief overview of the kind of week by week activities, just for context for them, that you would be involved in when you were doing network operations? So not just for you, but for the team. What are the kinds of activities that were typical in any given week as you maintained and operated the network?
Our fees at the city of Ammon, where I was at, just the normal residential fees, it didn't cover after hours or weekends. So if something happened with someone at someone's home, if we could fix it over the phone or over our computer, we would do it. Unless there was something, whoever was on call that evening or that weekend, if they felt like they could go to the house and take care of it when it wouldn't cost much of anything, they would just do it. But most of the residents are all aware that the coverage, we would roll a truck out the next morning, set up an appointment with them. That happened very rarely. Took months on at a time for being on call, and I would go maybe have a couple calls on a holiday weekend or whatever, but then I would go several weeks without having any calls. So that kind of thing, once the system's up and running, it runs very smooth. We were responsible for locating people go off the road, take out a pole. We would be responsible for that. That, like I think they said 4 or 5 times throughout the year. That's probably about average, about have issues like that.
So will you just use the word locating? Will you just describe what that means for some who may not know?
So here in Idaho, it's 811, but if a builder or anybody is wanting to do any work in the ground, they call in for dig locations. So all the utilities need to go out and mark where their lines are before anyone can work in the ground. So that we would be responsible for that. We did that in-house. Some utilities pay companies to do that for them. So that would be a daily aspect, especially in our area where it's growing so quickly. There's dig tickets called in all the time. I don't know exactly with Westport how much growth is going on there. So that would be a daily thing. Ammon ran, when I first started, there was just 3 of us working. When I left, there was 6 of us working on both the maintenance for running the actual electronic side of it, maintaining all of that, and then the guys maintaining the locating, putting in new fiber, fixing any of the repairs and things like that. So we were at a 5 or 6 man team there. But we were also doing new construction at the same time. So a lot of us, that's what we were busy with. But if it was just a normal, the system just running, 2 or 3 people were able to handle that just fine.
And then over the course of a year, how many events do you think you would encounter, whether they're electronic events, networking events, or damage to the system?
The power in our area was not great, so that would lead to issues at times. But as our system was able to improve and we got more generator backups and things like that, the events lessened. So the more redundancy you can sit into your system, the better. So I know I lived on the East Coast, and with power lines and everything, they would get knocked down quite a bit. So I'm sure you deal with that. People hitting our lines, actually taking a line down, maybe that was once a year at the most. So there's a couple memorable ones I've had. They always happen at the worst times, but that doesn't happen very often, especially once you get into a good groove with your locating. And the more people are, if you're outsourcing it, if the more familiar they are with your system, the better that is going to be.
So I just wanted to bring Tyler in as a resource. He's available for questions outside of this context, but are there any maintenance and operations questions from the committee that you've got in mind now that you want addressed, or are you good?
I think I'm good.
So I just had a question. I mean, so you said you actually ran the fiber, so you were troubleshooting the fiber. If the fiber broke, if something started chewing on it or whatever, you would go out and you would use the meters and test all that and find the breaks in that. So you would be responsible for I'm assuming the fiber switches, and then what about like the Ethernet switches and the IP switches and the provisioning and maintaining of all the VLANs and so forth? And with that, that was all part of that team?
Yeah, I personally didn't do a lot of the VLANing and all that aspect of it. The nice thing about the entry point software is just a normal technician can go in and can see where issues are. And then you can either, if he feels he has the ability to fix it himself, he can do that, or he can pass it on to a member of the team that can go in and do it. So the software made it very easy to figure out where the issues were. And some of it, the tools were there for the technician himself to fix it, or he'd have to call in someone from the team that would be able to handle the switches themselves. But usually anyone could figure out where the problem was. It was just whether they felt like they could fix it or not and had the training.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Keith, I mean, we're not there yet as far as, your decision-making process and the select board, approving the recommendations of this committee. But if the committee does decide to build a network similar to the other networks that are currently being deployed in Quincy and is deployed in Ammon and those, others that we're working with, keep in mind that we're going to apply a software platform that does all of the provisioning automatically. And so what Tyler was talking about specifically is, as part of that platform, we can identify every segment of the network and whether there's a problem with that segmentation. So we can even tell whether or not it's a PC issue inside the home, beyond the actual termination of the fiber point. And then we can trace that all the way back to the service provider themselves, the ISP, to determine whether or not, well, guess what? I'm not communicating with the router at the ISP location. And so all of that is monitored in real time. And that's why Brian is super interested in what we're doing in Massachusetts specifically, because he understands that if all he's got to do is send the crews out to fix physical issues in the network, and the software will do all of the diagnostic stuff and all of the monitoring stuff in real time, that takes a big, huge hunk of problem off of his plate. And that's why he's super interested in what we're doing and why we're having conversations with him. Just to give you that context and background.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So what, I think you will decide your process. So if you build a network, I think you would end up doing an RFP, and you would do an RFP. It might be two RFPs, one for the physical plant and one for the network, the logical plant. So the networking equipment, monitoring, troubleshooting, etc. Another RFP for physical. But that's a downstream decision. So I think you've got a series of decisions ahead of that. One of which is, are you going forward with something? And then that turns into the next steps. If you do decide to go forward, then in the next steps phase, you'll detail out what that process looks like. The key thing for us today, though, is to know in the report we're going to model an outsourced solution, and we're going to try and run that to ground as much as we can, meaning have as much detail about that. What does that look like? What does that cost? So that you can make decisions around that. So that's the key takeaway for me. Any other comments or questions on the maintenance and operations topic?
Could I
Sure.
just
Yes.
comment on that? I think that's the model that I think we're near consensus on. I hope so. And so I think it's important for us to figure out how we set up this entity. We've already passed the municipal light company thing at our town meeting. We'll hope to do it again. And if we then farm it out to somebody else to do it, we need a little internal management at the head of that company. How do we go about setting up that company? And I think in my own mind, I'm at that stage. I don't know. It seems to me you're still wanting us to make decisions. And I don't know how. I'm already halfway down the road, and I think Keith is, and I think Shauna is, and I'm not sure about the others, but so I'd like to get to where we assume that various of these things are going to happen, and that your report then gets into the specifics of how we do it.
So I'll talk at a high level. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you if you have your second vote and it passes, then the select board, as I understand it, the select board's in a position, they could function as the municipal light plant board, or they could hold an election for the municipal light plant board. I think they possibly could appoint, but we need your attorneys to weigh in on that. So I'm not a lawyer. It's either an appointment or an election. And they would that process would establish the board. And then my understanding is that board reports to the select board. And so they're under the guidance and authority of the select board. And so that's the macro level, the way it would function from a process point of view. But I do think you've got some decisions to make before you're taking those steps. So, and part of it is legal. So,
But Devin, sorry, Jeff. I still don't understand the options, right? So municipal light plant seems to be the way that most communities are going, but it also seems very archaic, and a lot of people don't understand it. We had talked a little bit about whether an enterprise fund makes sense, but I think for me, the fact that the board is appointed or elected, like that's fine. We would need to know that, but I'm thinking more about financially, how is it structured? Like, how do you get where does the money come from to start building and operating, and what does that timeline look like? And at what point you don't need, what information do the voters need at the next town meeting to say, yes, we need to go with this, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make a strong enough case for why this is the right way to go.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming your report is going to say that, but David, I know we kind of want to go that direction, but I think we owe the voters at least, here's what else you could do instead.
Yeah. Yeah. So our report will break it down. We'll have a total project cost, and then we'll break it also down to the cost per premise at various take rates. Let me show you. So we just did this modeling for New Bedford today. So this is not pretty. This is sort of spreadsheet level information, but let me show you what that looks like.
Well, and keep in mind, these numbers are for a subset of New Bedford,
Yes, they are
a
for a
small
subset.
downtown area that's carved off. So don't really pay attention to the numbers necessarily, because they're not actual, right? So.
Yeah. So what we've got here, this is talking about a project size of just 1,600. So it's downtown area, and a adjacent residential area, one fiber hut to support that number of subscribers.
And I believe it's all buried, correct, Jeff?
This is proposed as buried. Whether we do it as all buried is another thing, but this is
Right.
proposed as buried.
But it's calculated as all buried. Yeah.
Correct. So we've got cost structure here based on so this is what we would get from BRE, meaning we'll get footages and then we'll break it down to this section's all fiber optic cable. This one's splicing closures, this section. We've got vaults here. So it's this level of detail, duct here. So all of these categories are broken down. We've got a shelter here. So all of this is broken down. The important part, and then we've got labor over here. What's the cost for the labor to install it? And that all comes through over here into a total project cost. And so that's what's in yellow. And this is a little bit high in cost because there's some one-time, we're just modeling for 1,500 premises. In a normal scenario, you're going to do a bigger project and you're going to spread your fixed costs across a bigger group. So this is a little bit high. But what we have over here on the right is a slider. So you can see that it's reflecting a 62% take rate. That's a really key number. So if and this is, I think this is probably the concern that Paul and Renee expressed a couple of weeks ago. So you can see that this number right here, 4,000 per premise, really changes when you change the take rate. So if we go down to, let's just go down to 30% take rate or 29%. That number goes all the way up to 7,000 per premise because you're spreading your shared costs, that what we call the common costs, over fewer premises, fewer homes.
In this case, 462 to be
Yeah.
exact.
So, but then if we do the take rate, let's go back up to 70 or 80%. 80%, that drops to 3,000 per premise. Now, people may say, I don't want a $3,000 or a $4,000 bill, but we're going to finance that for 20 years. And at 3,400, it's going to be right around, well, this is pre-inflation. So we're probably at a 5% interest rate. So I haven't recalculated it given that interest rates are probably at 5%.
No, these are municipal bond rates. They won't be that high.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's David's world. So, but that translates to $26. It's going to be, it actually would be,
Less.
depending on what you get as an interest rate, it's going to be at 3,400, it's probably going to be around $20, $21, $22 a month of the total cost. And we're showing if it's $26 a month, we think your M&O is going to be around 20 to 21. And we think your services are going to be at 10. This is rough. This isn't your calculation. This is what we did in New Bedford. But you're still at $56, and that's for a symmetrical gig. So that's speeds of 1,000 by 1,000. So, I think the key thing for you to see is what does this look like in a spreadsheet? And the key variable here is take rate. So if we get a lot of people to participate, then it's favorable for everybody. And we'll give you the same thing. You'll have a spreadsheet and you can move the take rate and see what the impact is on the modeling.
So we're
Does
going to
that
get something like this out of that BRE report.
So what we get in BRE, this COM tab, what they're going to tell us is distances.
Do you want me to show that to him?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
I can do it in about 2 seconds here. Hang on. Pull it up.
Yeah, Devin will show you exactly what we're going to get out of BRE for the town of Westport. And the important data for us is we know what, in Westport, we know we've got some long driveways. And that's a variable. We don't want to make an assumption that driveways are all 30 feet because some are going to be 30 feet and some of them are going to be 350 feet. And so the BRE data will tell us that.
But the long driveways are all very wealthy properties. So don't worry about it. The short driveways are the lower value properties. And that there, the cost isn't going to be very great. So I think this driveway issue is a red herring.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and that may drive your policy, David, that you're gonna go to the curb, and then if people have longer driveways, they're gonna pay more, and if, so that's a policy thing you would decide.
And the other thing I think that can we pick up sections? It sounds like for Fairhaven, you're picking up a section of the town. And I'm just wondering if we can proceed in a way section wise in the north end of the town where we've just gotten financing to put out the 2 loops. Why those are all densely settled.
Mhm.
And there are other parts of the town that are pretty densely settled, and then there are others that are very dispersed.
Mhm.
And can we be selective in trying to approach those?
Yeah, it'll map out all of that. So I originally opened up Bedford. I think Fairhaven would be a better one to illustrate this, because this is more of what we're proposing to the select board on Monday, right? Is do a full kind of town-wide design. But essentially you can, let me kind of zoom, you can see kind of Fairhaven, right? Then as I zoom in, so these green squares right here, can you guys see those okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Each of those represents what we call an aggregation hut. Okay, so think of it as a little building.
Yep.
Okay, and then all of the fiber runs feeds into those, and those feed back centrally in a configuration of like a backbone, like Keith is doing right now, right? For your city specific network, right? So that kind of a configuration. But if I zoom in on this, it shows me quite a bit of detail. Now you'll notice that it's not exactly precise. So if I go into this neighborhood down here, okay, you can kind of see where the homes are, right? And this is done in automation using software. So this is not a person drawing these, right? But it is able to map. You can kind of see how the paths go, right? And if I click on any one of these, it tells me what is that, and exactly what is in that connection, that junction box, if you will. Okay. And it shows me all of the, that's a medium vault and all of the cabling and everything in there. Okay. If I click on this right here, it shows me that is an 864 count fiber cable. Okay, and I can trace that back. And then it also shows, it doesn't show, it kind of puts the connection usually in the middle of the piece of property. So not necessarily right now in the middle of the home.
But we can move those too.
But they can be moved around and adjusted. But right now, whether you adjust those to be, hey, I want to come into this side of the home, or I want to go around to this side of the home, at this stage of the game, it doesn't affect the financials much at all to move something from here to here, right? Because it shortens certain lengths and it lengthens others out, right? So again, keep in mind, this is not a design that, say, a contractor would use to build the network. This is a design to help us get some really good, solid financial projections. Okay.
But they would take this design. So we call this high level design. They would
Yeah.
take this, and low level design means they take this and they actually drive the streets and make sure that it's all
Yes.
doable. And they
Well-
adjust it based on, they move it from high level to construction ready. So it is a building block that can then be moved into a construction ready design.
Right. So right here we see a T2, hub hut. Okay. Well, if they drive this in, they go, you know what? That's not going to work. That location is not going to work. It needs to be moved. It needs to be moved down here or over here. They can then move it, and it will recalculate all of those paths.
Guys, this is much too detailed for us to worry about at this point.
Right.
I think we need to pull back and be assured that you've got a system that will help us generate this information, but don't zero in so much on this information right now.
That's great. That's fine. That's good advice. So anyway,
So,
that
Devin,
just gives you an idea.
I had a
Yeah.
question. So if we get this high level model, do we get this this particular dynamic model? So you said this is iterative. So if we were going, would we get this access to this model? So when we went into the more detailed model, we would be building off of this
Yes.
dynamic model.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you own this data as far as we're concerned.
We'll
Yeah.
take it on faith. I will, anyway.
Yeah, you'll actually get, Keith, you'll actually get access. So, this is in the cloud. You'll actually get access to this GIS file, and you can actually download it if you want to.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, that gives you an idea of kind of when Jeff showed you that bill of materials, this is what gives us the bill of materials.
All right.
I'm with David though, a little too much detail.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, we want you to know that you're getting a good output.
Okay, we understand that. Let's move on.
All right.
Good.
Okay. So you've helped us in terms of direction. One key question for the report is going to be the question of aerial versus underground. And that's really a question. It's very expensive to do underground if you got a lot of rock. Do you have poles everywhere throughout the town of Westport?
Yes.
I don't know about everywhere, but nearly everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, like
So-
for some neighborhoods, like my neighborhood, everything is underground. So, but getting to the neighborhood, everything's aerial.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
in the fairly new neighborhoods, they seem to be using underground utilities. But those usually have the tubing, piping underground, and everything, all the pull tubes and that. So, I would
Yeah.
assume that there's available space in those.
The planning board required that the new neighborhoods put in underground systems. And so I hope you can feed your cable in through that.
No, yeah, we can absolutely do it. The numbers we model to are, in the $20 a foot range for favorable underground conditions. But we're hearing numbers in downtown Boston that are like, $3,000 a foot, just crazy numbers. So, that's dealing with the complexity of downtown Boston. So the main question we would come back to you with is, if you were to give us guidance on 80% aerial, 20% buried, you don't have to do this today, but that will be helpful to us if we have a sense of what percentage of the town would be aerial versus what percentage would be buried.
Could I just suggest on that, most everything in the town, I would think would have to be aerial. And the only places where it would be underground would be in facilities where they've already got underground electricity and communications. And if you've got a way of feeding your line in through that, why you don't even have to do any digging underground, you just have to feed into an existing tube.
Yeah, they won't let us do that. They won't let us touch their infrastructure. So we would have to put in our own conduit, and we would do it with directional drilling. It's very doable.
Yeah.
But we
Okay.
want the modeling to be accurate. So it's not a question of whether we can do it.
Yeah.
It's very doable. It's really a matter of what percentage should be buried and what percentage should be aerial. In the
I
model,
think 80-20 sounds
could-
reasonable.
We could
80-20.
find out from the planning board how many subdivisions have these underground systems and provide you with that information.
That'd be excellent. So we're gonna go, Keith's saying 80-20. David, any help you can give us there? We're happy to talk to people if you want to introduce us or point us.
Okay.
But we'll start with 80-20 until we get a different variable.
Do you guys, down at the point, you guys have underground?
No, we don't want it underground. We've got all the
Yeah.
poles up here and we
You,
just,
you know, a bit like in my neighborhood, it's all underground.
but
In my neighborhood, it's all underground. So I was thinking, and we've probably got 100 houses back here.
Yeah, but
So it
that-
might be more than 80-20, but that's probably as good a number as any until we get better information.
But I think all of the dense neighborhoods up at the north end and at the point and at the harbor and so forth are aerial. They're gonna, and the dispersed areas are gonna be largely aerial. You aren't gonna run a lot of stuff underground. So I think it's gonna be very close to 100%. And I'd say 90-10, probably more than 80-20. That's a guess, but I'll try to get you information from the planning board on the number of underground systems in newly developed neighborhoods over the past, say, 20 years.
Okay.
Keith, the fiber you're deploying now for the city's network, is that all aerial?
Right now, it's all aerial. Yes.
And who are you working with? Who owns those poles?
I do.
It's either going to be Eversource. or it's-
Yeah.
I think
From National Grid, right?
we
Yeah.
have both, right? And then we're using the municipal spots on.
Yes. Municipal space.
Yeah.
How much of it, National Grid seems to be easier to work with than Eversource. Do you know the ratio there?
That I don't know.
All right.
Is that something that Comtrax is just managing for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I was intending them to just
So
take care of that.
We might be able to get a little bit of information from Brian and his team on that.
Okay.
All right. Two more items to finish. One on the legal. Shauna, you kind of referred to this. We are working on a case study paper with as much information as we can get on the question of municipal light plant versus enterprise fund. The reality, I mean, we're not attorneys, so we can't make legal claims. So we're just trying to glean information and then learn from the attorneys that are involved in this process. New Bedford and Chelsea, I will tell you, both believe strongly that an enterprise fund is going to be much more flexible and easy to work with than the municipal light plant structure. They will also be the first to do it that way. And so it's never been tested. The legal advice they're getting is if it does get tested, meaning if someone raises a stink about it or files a claim over it, they're going to go to special legislation rather than litigate it. So they're just going to go to the legislature and say, we want the authority to build this infrastructure as an enterprise, under an enterprise fund. And they feel confident that they would be able to get that through the special legislation. So we're going to document this to the degree we can. But again, we're not attorneys. We can tell you which attorneys are advising the different cities. And, you know, and as you progress, you may want to spend the money to get some legal advice. KP Law is advising New Bedford. So I don't think it would be incredibly expensive to get advice on this, but, you know, those are the two things that are in play at this point, and we're trying to summarize it into kind of a memo format or a case study format just to help move things along.
I'll defer. Shauna can talk about KP Law, but I'd just say New Bedford and Quincy are much larger urban areas, and they have much more management capability than we do. And so I think my personal view is that the municipal light plant is a much better way to go. But our town attorney is KP Law, and so Shauna may want to raise that with them.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to them a little bit when before a town meeting, but they didn't really have a lot of depth, or we at least didn't get into a lot of depth with them. It mostly just confirmed, yes, this is how it's structured. Like, because I think, like, even at town meeting, a lot of people were like, we're not an electric company, and you know, this is ancient. It's like, yes, it is ancient, but
yeah.
So I think that, I mean, I think they thought, yeah, this is the way we're going to do it.
I will send you the two attorneys, the names of the two attorneys at KP Law
Okay.
that are advising New Bedford. At least you'll know who they are. And then
Yeah.
they're probably specialists in this area.
Probably, yeah.
Who are they at all, by any chance working at Fairhaven?
No, Fairhaven uses Tom Crotty
Okay,
and Richard Manley.
all right.
Two
Anyway, I just thought, but Fairhaven is going the municipal light route, and most of the towns in Massachusetts that you're working with are going that way.
Yes.
Have
Yeah, on
you
the
had
last,
Have
Go ahead,
any, you had any feelers from Dartmouth?
no, we haven't talked to Dartmouth yet.
Oh, well, what, they're right in between us and New Bedford. I think you ought to bring them into the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That-
we're all
sorry.
for that. We're,
Uh,
you know,
If you know anyone over there, I'd love an introduction. So
yeah, and we're probably gonna try and do some things at the Serpide level, just sort of updating Serpide. There's a good chance, so this is important information. There's a good chance that the $50 million, well, the money that flows from the federal to the state, there's a good chance that it will move through the planning agencies. So there's a decent chance that Serpide will get a certain allotment of the grant money, and that the towns would then go to Serpide with their grant request. So it's not locked in stone, but there's a decent chance it will go that way. We're being told. So
We are in the midst of negotiating with Serpide to help us support our climate resiliency program here in Westport. And so we have very close relationships with them and very good relationships with them. So having them be a key player in this all, I think will be very helpful.
well, I won't say this out loud, David, but
I did.
but not having Dartmouth in motion is going to hurt Dartmouth in terms of getting any of that grant money, and having you in motion is going to help you.
Well, I'll drop them. I'll send them a hint.
All right. Anything else on any other legal stuff? So one last thing, if I talk to you about betterment and the special legislation that Fairhaven has submitted related to that, have we covered that?
No.
Okay, so Tom Crotty, who's their attorney, has advised them that betterment law in Massachusetts assumes that you're going to connect everybody. So it assumes that when you put in sewer and water, that it goes to every premise. So his advice, and it was backed up by Richard Manley at Lock Ward, is that they do special legislation so that they can do an opt-in model, so that they don't have to take it to every home. They can do it just to those homes that want to participate. So he's crafted the special legislation. They're ready to submit it. It's going to town meeting next week or 2 weeks, just to approve. They're going to approve the process of submitting it to special legislation. And it's to get that opt-in capability under the betterment structure. So you just need to be aware.
I think that would be a very good feature. We'll try to follow that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The last thing is Julie will send you, we don't have, and we're free to cover it. We don't want to hold you longer than the hour. We've distilled the strategic items into a few pages in the format of questions. And really what we're trying to help you do is we're trying to say, look, we think these are the important strategic categories, and we're trying to put them to you in a question format, not because we're going to force you to answer those questions today, but we're trying to give you a framework that you can make decisions around. So for today, let's just say we're going to send this document to you. It goes with that deck that we covered over the last couple of sessions. And probably not in the next time, but probably 2 sessions from now, we'll come back to it and try and hone in on a decision-making process around those strategic issues. Okay. So you'll get the 2 or 3 pager. The homework is really just to go through it, edit, scribble, make notes, ask questions to yourself. And then a month from now, we're going to come back to it and talk about you know, which of those decisions you're ready to make, which of them you need more information, that kind of thing. Okay. All right, so Julie will send that out. Maybe just attach it to the meeting agenda you already sent out, Julie.
And you're going to send out the recording of the meeting.
Shauna's in charge of that.
The recording goes out on Vimeo. It'll have to process and then
Okay.
Keith will get it
We'll have
posted.
access to it. Yes. Okay. Good.
So the go ahead.
No, go ahead, Shauna.
So the next meeting is planned for June 16. And then we'll have a June 30 meeting. I'm not going to be available for the June 30 meeting, so I'm going to pass the torch to Keith to run that meeting. Did anybody have anything else that they wanted to cover before we leave?
No, do you, so with that, Shauna, we would want you there for the decision making. So we'll either adjust that agenda item or we're also open to adjusting the meeting schedule, and that's totally up to you.
Yeah. I'll have to talk to you offline. I'm taking quite a bit of time off, so
Okay.
but
Is there any possibility of doing that at the next meeting?
Yes, we can. I'm going to be in the middle of a wilderness area, so Devin will be running that meeting. There
you
won't
guys
be,
will be fine without me, whatever we're going to cover, and I'm
Well,
willing to read things, but
but I
they're
think
just not available.
I think Shauna's more important than you, Devin. Sorry.
Ooh. I'm
I think we
flattered.
would all concur with that in terms of the decision making.
in
We would
terms
agree
of-
with that.
Local, in terms of
We
local
think
decisions.
about that. I mean, I'm not here June 30.
Okay.
So, and I wouldn't be back until July 14. So, so I will definitely be here on the 16th. Though.
Okay. All right. We'll play with the agenda based on that. That's good to know.
Okay.
All right. Any questions on the stuff we've covered today? We covered a bit of territory here.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Thank you all.